Are you ready to perform at your highest potential? Thank you for joining this GP Strategies webinar, where we'll explore best practices and innovative insights to help you and your organization improve performance.
Understand the whole picture, short of a basic needs analysis process. And they say it's like someone asking for a headache tablet, but not giving them the chance to really scratch the surface and get into why they have the headache. And they want to act more like a doctor, if you will, and get to that root cause and make a difference on that strategic level. And this is precisely what effective learning measurement will allow you to do, to partner with the business in a truly strategic way and have solid, irrefutable evidence of the success of learning initiatives that you lead. So what impact could that have on you, your career, your success in your organizations? Not only measuring learning events, but also new technologies and processes, and really being able to show exactly the impact you're having on the business. All of this is possible, and that's what our session here today is all about. So how do we figure out how to measure some of this? Because
Oliver, so we've had like 30 extra people join just in that last couple of minutes. Can we just toggle back and let people know where the chat and the polling is before we forge on ahead, and then we can jump in? Is that okay, mate?
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to do it in just a moment. So for those of you that have just joined, please do use the chat function. If you have just joined, just say hi in the chat. Make sure to select to everyone. You'll see that on the screen that I'm sharing right now. And just say hi and where you're dialing in from. That would be great, just so that we have a chance to get to know you as we move through this. We'll also be using the polling function. It may pop up on your screen. Alternatively, if you don't find it, when I do call out the first poll, it'll be on the right-hand side down the bottom there. Hi, Alec from China, and I think we had Srinivas from India as well joining us, and a lot more besides. I won't call them all out as we're getting lots and lots of people replying in the chat. So that's Ben and I, and what we do, and I want to dive right into the topic for today, which is measurement. And look, we've got measurement all around us every day. You just look around, and whether you're a fisherman or a chef, be it at home or for your vocation, you're going to be doing measurements all over the place. And I just want to kick us off with a little activity by having everybody use the chat to think of something that perhaps you've personally measured today. Not necessarily for work, but just something in your home life. What have you measured today? So the chat's open. Please do make sure you select to everyone. And just let me know, what have you measured today? Right, Raoul shares, I've measured time today. Yep. Shivanshu says the same, time. Shirley has measured her cat's medication. Fantastic.
Very unique measurement there.
That's a very unique measurement. Yeah, was that in milliliters, grams? Okay, we got somebody who's measured steps. Thatri from Thailand says running distance. Sonia says my weight. I'm also the same. I measured my weight this morning. Michael Hudson says hanging a picture. So measuring the alignment for hanging a picture. Fantastic. So I think as we get more things, right, my task list, my to-do list, a form of measurement perhaps. Exactly. And look, you guys are very familiar with measurement, of course. And kind of course you are. You're in this session today, which is all about measurement. But these are all things that we have systems for measuring, right? We know what a kilogram is for our body weight, or when we're buying rice at the market. We know what a kilometer is for when we used to commute to the office. And we've got systems in place for those measurements. But you don't necessarily have something quite so concrete when it comes to measuring human capital and its effectiveness. And also the impact of learning and development initiatives that we're putting out there as learning professionals. We just don't have such a ready scale. We have to figure out what to measure. And it's not always that easy, right? Not just opening a cookbook and it tells you what the measurements are. And that's one of the challenges that we face in this profession. It's really figuring out what to measure. And we do have some assistance, right? We've got some models that have been in place for quite a while. And we might have heard, for example, of the different levels of learning measurement. So you can see that here on the slide. And I want to start off with our first poll. question here about these levels of measurement. So Zach, if you could launch the poll, what I'd like to ask is, have you heard of Kirkpatrick's 4 levels of learning? So the poll's open. It should have popped up on your right-hand bar. If it's not, maybe it's popped up in the screen. Please do look at that right-hand side. I'll just toggle back up so you guys can see that. Please do fill in that poll. I'll give you a bit longer for the first poll just so we have that opportunity. So the question, have you heard of Kirkpatrick's 4 levels of learning evaluations? And I think we're getting the results on. I think we've probably had enough responses, right, Zach? So if you can share those results, give you just about 10 more seconds to get that done. And then hopefully we can share the results, Zach. There we go. So let's take a look at these results. So 12% of you have said that you've never heard of it. 21% said heard of it but never really applied it. 2% have tried it out but didn't really adopt it. The majority, or at least the largest percentage, have used some of the basics. And 12% of you have said it's an integral part of our learning. So great, and thanks for sharing that. So it looks like most of you at least know about it, and many of you have put it into practice as well. So the Kirkpatrick model is really based on the levels 1, 2, 3, and 4. And Jack Phillips, another learning guru, added that level 0 and that level 5 to help us think about how to measure. And level 1's the satisfaction of surveys, sort of satisfaction surveys, your happy sheets, if you will, all the way up to that impact phase in level 5 of business results. And this model, which is a foundational one for any who have officially studied learning, is a measurement model that's been around since 1959. So it's over 60 years old. And you'd think after that 60 years, we ought to be pretty good at it. I mean, we've been practicing something for 60 years. We should be able to do a good job with measuring right up at that level 4 and 5, at that impact level. But what we found is, 96% of learning leaders really want to measure the impact. And a lot of you in this session are in that group, I'm sure, because this is all about measuring impact. But only 10% are actually measuring learning in their organization. So what I want to ask you is why? What do you think? So let's put up the next poll question. So Zach, if you can launch the poll. What do you think the biggest challenge of measuring impact in your organization is? If you are on the consultant side, then think about the organizations that you work with. And I'm sure many of you want to put more than one answer here. But if you can put those answers, we'll just keep the poll open for just about 5 more seconds. And then Zach, if you close the poll, and we'll get the results in just a moment. So what's that biggest challenge in your organization? And we'll get the results in just a moment on that. And it is hard just to pick one, right? The challenges that we face are often many. So I think the poll results should be coming up any moment. And here we go. So we had the majority of you saying, I can't get the data. I can't get the right data to measure. And then a close second there, we had, we don't know what or how to measure. So I really appreciate you guys for sharing there. And the research that showed us that 96% want to measure and 10% actually are, what they found was they don't really know what to do, what to measure or how to measure. And that's what was found on that survey. And so our challenge today is to really crack the code on figuring out this what and how, and why it seems to be our biggest obstacle. So from our experience with many organizations, it comes down to this alignment challenge. So we've got this wonderful training program, and the organization wants to increase profitability. We've got our strategic goals, let's say, on the other side. And we just don't know how to necessarily connect the dots between those big strategic goals and these learning initiatives. right? And we can't just look at investment in training and stock price and say, okay, they're intrinsically related, right? So they might contribute, but we need to connect those dots somehow. We can't just expect some miracle to happen and people will say, oh, great, your training did it. We need to show some evidence. And that's what this session is all about. After our time today, I want you to walk away with one more tool in your toolbox, a measurement tool called the measurement map. And we're going to show how the map defines alignment between your investments and business goals. We're going to see how the map identifies what to measure, what metrics can we actually show, and also the causal chain of evidence between our investment and the goals. And we're also going to do a quick little activity so you can see how a map actually gets built, so you can start practicing at your own organization. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Ben to do the hard work, really. Ben, have you got control?
So just checking, am I presenting now? Should be good, right?
Yeah, you've got it. It's all yours. Good. Feel free to jump to the next slide. Okay, I can see it's come up now.
So hi, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. I'm going to delve into the different layers of the measurement map. And Oliver's already brought up the Kirkpatrick scale. And I totally agree with you guys, both from working within businesses and also as a consultant on the outside of businesses. The biggest challenge is that we don't know what to measure, how to measure it. And it's a big showstopper. And, you know, I spend a lot of time working in the leadership development and professional development space. And that's even harder again to measure, because you're talking about behavior and mindset change, distributed over time, not directly related, often not directly related to revenues. So it does take work. And I think one of the other things that we would probably call out, if we were being really honest with ourselves, is actually the Kirkpatrick scale does work. It's a fine list of moments or things to look for in measurement. But the reality is it takes a lot of time, or it can take time and work and effort to actually give you something to measure. You know, it's very easy for me to say, how much do you weigh? And you can say, you know, 80 kilos, and that's me being wishful thinking, but you can say 80 kilos, and we all know what a kilo is because there's actually a physical kilogram sitting in France, and everyone knows what that kilogram weighs. But when I say, hey, what's the measurement for this coaching training we've deployed? How do we really measure learning gain? Well, that's actually a little bit easier, but behavior change and especially business results and ROI, there is no magic physical kilogram sitting around that I can just pull out and measure. We need to define what that kilogram is, what's it made out of, how many bits make up a kilogram, and then we need to actually find a way to then measure it once we've defined what it is. And so really, where the part that's missing from this equation is the design phase. And that is when you're in the development, actually taking the time to build in measurement into your design. And what I want to get across to you guys today is, first of all, breakdown of the measurement map, but I'm really going to delve into the impact, the benefits of going through a measurement design process, and the way it can impact your design in a few different ways. I can see someone's written something in the Q&A. A few questions are coming in, so we'll keep an eye on those as well.
I'll keep an eye on them for you, Ben. No worries.
Thanks. So look, that's not rocket science, really. You know, alignment means connecting the dots between, you know, Oliver spoke earlier about a miracle occurring. Well, we need to connect the dots in between our investment, in this case, training, and the goals that we're hoping to achieve. And in the middle of that are really your leading indicators, right? So what's the first evidence, the first sign that things might be working? Whether it's a sales training, a leadership training, a technical training, a process training, a systems training, what are the very first things that you would look for to see if that's working? And then, you know, how does that contribute to the results, and how do those results contribute to the strategic goals? So really, that's what's missing. You might have heard leading and lagging indicators. We've moved away from using lagging indicators. First of all, there's somewhat of a negative connotation in some circles. And really, ultimately, what business want is results. So that's really what we're going to focus on here. So let's break these sections down into a little bit more detail. So in the chat, make sure you've selected everyone. It's a quick spot the difference. What's the difference between these two pictures here?
Prize for the first one in the chat to find it.
Yeah. Let's see the first person on chat. What's the difference? Thank you, Sam. You're
Sam's
the
our
winner.
winner.
Yeah, there's a sold sign on there. So think of business results as the measurable, often financial, but the measurable result of something, and then the leading indicators that are evidence of the things to come. So let's talk about that. Let's say you're selling a house, right? You want to sell a house for $1 million. That's your goal, right? What are some of the indicators a real estate agent might have that they are moving in the right direction to achieving their result of selling a house for the right value? Type that in the chat. What are some of those indicators that might tell me I'm on the right track? See what's going on in the chat. And by the way, I noticed some chats you were responding to, Oliver. I wasn't seeing them. Yeah, okay. Number of viewings, number of offers I'm receiving. What else? It might be the number of clicks on an advertisement online. It could be the number of inquiries that come through, number of text messages. So all of these indicators might form the basis of me realizing whether or not we're on track to achieve the results. So if I'm getting the right number of viewings, if I'm getting the right number of offers, if I'm getting the right number of clicks on the ad, if I'm getting all of these things happening, then I can be confident, or at least be more confident that I'm on track for those results. And so if you think about that from a training perspective, once I understand my goals, and once I understand the results I want to achieve and I've defined those leading indicators, I can then use that data, that information to inform what type of investment in learning I want to make. Right? Often, and I think we can all be honest with ourselves, a lot of times, and to Oliver's point about being a pharmacist, just giving out the medicine rather than having the chance to actually go in and diagnose, the way that we might find ourselves working is, and I know I find myself in a situation a lot, my partners will come to me and say, we want to train these leaders in delegation skills. Okay, so why do you want to do that? What is it you're trying to fix? And sometimes the answer is clear and sometimes it's not. But often we're rushing in to deliver training without really measuring what is the result we're trying to achieve, what are the behaviors we want to see that will lead to that result, and then have we aligned that training to actually making that happen. So let's do a little example together. Let's imagine that you own a restaurant, and you're going to have to use your chat function here, guys. So make sure you found your chat and make sure you've selected everybody. So we want to invest in some front of house training, and our goal is that we want to have a profitable restaurant. So let's go and break this down into some pieces here. I've got a list of different leading indicators here. Number of desserts ordered, number of incorrect orders, number of parking spots in the lot, number of bottles of wine ordered. In the chat, tell me which of these would not be a good leading indicator KPI for front of house training? Which of these would not be a good way to indicate if our training is being successful? Go ahead, type it in the chat.
And while you guys are doing that, please do remember, drop it in the chat. Don't use the Q&A for this, because otherwise your other folks on the call won't actually be able to see it. Also, please do make sure that you're sending to everyone, not just to panelists.
Yeah,
So
Nicole, Kira, and Gabriel, I can see you guys are responding in the Q&A. Make sure you're responding in the chat. You've got it right. Parking spots. They're not going to tell me at all if my in-house training, my front of house training, is being effective, and also isn't necessarily going to be a correlation to the profitable restaurant. So you've got that right. Let's flip it around and let's look at the business results. So which of these would not be a good business result KPI for front of house training? Go ahead and put that in the chat. Yeah, Sam's got it. Sam, that's 2 times you've been first in. If I had real points for prizes for you, you'd be earning them. Yeah, advertising. So look, this is just a little activity to put it out, but you're right, advertising isn't there, but average table spend and dollars in wasted food are what we're trying to look for here. So what we're really looking to create here is a causal chain of evidence. And when we're doing the design of this, we don't really start with the training first. We should really start with the end in mind. So should we want a profitable restaurant? Okay, well, what results indicate we've got a profitable restaurant? In this case, we've got, we want to see an increase in average table spend, and we want to see less spend on wasted food, or less wasted money in food. And then how do we know if that's happening? Well, we should see an increase in the number of desserts ordered, a decrease in the number of incorrect orders, and number of bottles of wine ordered. Great. And now that I know that I need that, my front of house training, if I don't address desserts ordered and how to avoid taking incorrect orders and how to promote selling extra bottles of wine, then I may be designing training and delivering training that's not actually taking me where I want to go. So it's a causal chain of evidence. So let's work through that. I've got the front of house training. It's trained people on those key things to turn those leading indicators into action. Those leading indicators, so more desserts, more wine equals an increased average table spend. People are correctly taking the orders, which now means that we're not wasting food with food being sent back. Of course, the chef plays a role there, but we're not training the kitchen, we're training the front of house. So we've got to make sure the chef isn't serving cold food or spoiled fish. And then hopefully what that leads to is a profitable restaurant. And the one thing you'll notice about all of these is that they're all qualitative. They're all measurable. A lot of times when we're getting into this measurement conversation with our partners, people are throwing out things to measure that are just impossible to measure, right? We need our kilos. We need to define what our kilo it looks like. And in this case, for this restaurant, this is what our kilo looks like. Number of ordered desserts, number of incorrect orders, a number of bottle of wine. So, just shift gears a little bit to take it away from workplace training or the F&B space. I want to kind of give you an even clearer picture of a causal chain of evidence. And let's take Michael Phelps, right? Michael Phelps, I think, won 23 or 28 gold medals. But what does that really take? And let's go from the end in mind, right? So the strategic goal for Michael Phelps is I want to win a lot of Olympic gold medals. And to get there, I need to qualify the Olympics, so I need these results. I need freestyle times, butterfly times, etc., under certain times. Now, I can't just go and design a training regime that's going to take me based on that. I need to go deeper. What are my leading indicators? How many breaths am I taking in key laps? How many strokes am I taking? What's my takeoff time like? What's my reaction time? How's my tumble turn? What's my body fat percentage? What's my caloric intake? What's my resting heart rate? How much sleep am I getting? What's my weightlifting numbers? And so when I've defined that, now I can start to craft a training regime that's going to help take Michael Phelps to the Olympics. And so the things I want you to remember is that it's a causal chain, right? One thing leading to another gets us to our strategic results. But when we're in the design phase, we start with the end in mind and we work backwards from there. Now, this could be a big strategic training initiative, or it might be something quite small. It really doesn't have to be like a 3-month project. It can be done pretty quickly. So now that we understand what the measurement map is about, it's about having clear strategic goals. It's about breaking those strategic goals into business results that will lead to those, and then defining a range of different indicators that tell us we're on the right track, then going back further and building training that then directly helps us achieve those. So what's the impact on design? How does going through a measurement map impact our design? Well, we often use the design thinking approach. So I don't know if this isn't a session about design thinking. But if I look here, empathize is when I go and do my learner personas. I go and analyze my audience, understand learner preferences, understand the culture of a company. I really go in and do my understanding. I define what that means, the parameters, the limitations. I ideate on solutions around that. I prototype and do quick testing, and I might do that a lot of different times, getting feedback, and then I launch, right? Which stage here, just type in the chat, would you say that the measurement mapping process would come in?
And while folks are getting to the chat, I'll also be dropping in a link just to design thinking for learning professionals, microsite that we have for some extracurricular reading.
Yeah, the point I can see I've got ideate, empathize. The answer is define. So I need to have some information about the business and about the learners before I can start to define anything, right? And definitely when I'm creating a measurement map, I'm defining what we're going to measure. Now, some of you are right. Yes, I will eventually maybe prototype this. So when we ran this for a large automotive manufacturer in their dealerships. We went and did a lot of analysis and we empathized with our learner population. We defined measurements, but we also defined what technologies could work, what types of what types of limitations, how much time learners have, when they could learn. We kind of went through that process, ideated, prototyped, and tested. And yes, we did see that as we were measuring, we could actually go in and tell, were these leading indicators changing? Was there any movement on these leading indicators? So in that way, the measurement map does come in the testing phase and the prototyping phase, but I will have already defined that. So it's definitely in the define phase. So in the define phase, there's two really big, there's a lot of influences a measurement map can have, but I'll just focus on two. On the left-hand side here, I've got, it can help us validate our learning outcomes and our content. And on the right-hand side, it can help us validate the choices of learning modality and the types of behaviors we want. So I'll break those down. But just to come back to Oliver's earlier point of a miracle occurs, and I mentioned a lot, and I think you could all put your hands up and agree with this, I'm sure, because I've been in this game for 20 years and I continuously see it. We want to move away from, hey, I want a course on emotional intelligence, or I want a course on sales skills, or I want this course, and then somehow a miracle is meant to occur and strategic goals are going to come out of that. I want to make sure that we are, if someone does say they want emotional intelligence, I want to validate that that's actually the thing that's going to move them forward. And if someone does want sales skills, well, look, there's a whole universe of sales skills that you could teach to somebody. What dimensions of sales are really what's important? And so when we start to use our measurement mapping and the define phase to validate our learning outcomes, that's what we can achieve. So let's do a little exercise together, a little activity, okay? I want you all to imagine, I know that some of you or most of you don't work in a car dealership, but hopefully it's an environment we can all kind of imagine or identify with. So I want you to imagine you run a car dealership sales team, right? Just to make it interesting, I'm going to say we are selling Toyotas, nice, high, reliable, high volume car. So we know that the sales performance is down, right? We've been asked to deliver some sales training as a learning team. We know that the strategic goal is to generate more profitability and increase our market share, increase Toyota's market share in our market. Now, let me ask you, if you were just given this, forget about measurement mapping for a minute. We know we got to increase profit, and we know we got to build a training. What types of skills might you include in your sales training? Just off the top of your head, what are some common things you might see in a sales training? Go ahead. Yeah, products, services, communication skills, negotiation skills, empathy, question and listening, problem solving. Yeah, I'm going to keep on going. Yeah, rebuttals, right? So how to deal with rejection and how to overcome resistance, understanding competition, listening. Yeah, selling skills, communication, networking. You guys have got it. Thank you. So yeah, and that's what often happens in training. Someone's like, we need sales skills. And then you go out to the marketplace and you go, hey, we need training on sales skills. Either you've got some learning person who's understaffed looking on companies' websites at sales training on predefined sales skills, or you're going out into an RFP asking for things and pulling in vendors. But everything you've got there is right. Now, I'm going to show you a measurement map. And I want you to tell me again, or after you've looked at this measurement map, how what you've just written may change. So business results, total sales volume, total gross profits, customer sales volume, gross profit per sale, repeat referral sales, gross profit per sale. And then we get into our leading indicators. These are really important. These are your hint for what things to validate if the ideas you had for training are correct. Closing ratio, number of referred customers, and that's going to be defined by number of customer contacts, number of appointments booked, number of product presentations. So we're talking about walking a customer around a vehicle and helping them have a demonstration, right? Have a test drive. Number of proposals presented, the quality of our social media reviews, a customer satisfaction index. So look back at some of those skills. What's missing? What are some things that you might really zero in on to really help make sure we're actually going to move the needle on these leading indicators? Yeah, so people might want some kind of business acumen, understanding how a dealership makes money. Absolutely, it's a really good idea. That can create a powerful why and an investment in the learner to understand why they're learning all this other stuff, right? What else? Look at the specific leading indicators. What makes a customer come back? Yes, there's some analysis of customer attitudes and behaviors. Look at social media reviews. What could we do? What sort of learning might we want to put in if we know that social media has a big impact on the number and quality? If social media has a big impact on us, what's some extra training we might include in there? No one's mentioned, for example, presentations. We haven't mentioned how to give a great dealer demonstration or a test drive. And so when you start to do a measurement map, it takes you away from generic things like negotiation skills or selling communication, and it helps you really zero in on what dimension of that skill do we really want to focus in on? But on top of that, are there some extra things we hadn't even considered, such as social media savvy, right? Or whatever that may be, in order to turn those to move the needle on those leading indicators. So this is just a little kind of example on how a measurement map can actually impact some of the choices you might make in training. I'll share another quick example, and this is more of an anecdotal story. Working with a large bank, and this bank wanted to train a large number of people managers, so frontline managers, on a whole range of leadership skills. And one of the issues they wanted to address was coaching. So, well, why do you want to address coaching? Well, they just need to be good coaches. Managers need to be good coaches. And we're like, okay, well, what are we going to do about it? How do we actually know that that's happening? What's the real issue behind it? And as we went through a process of both the empathy phase, but especially the defining phase, we realized that the main issue wasn't so much that they had the skills or knowledge, that it was a time issue, right? They didn't have time to coach. So it turned out it actually wasn't even a training issue, the coach thing. And so if we threw coaching training at it, threw money at coaching training, it may not have moved the needle because the time issue wasn't resolved. So a measurement mapping process helped us validate and eliminate a certain part of the budget around training until they resolve that side of the that systemic issue. Another dimension of it is that this part of the bank had very fluid teams. They were working in projects. And actually what we found that what they really wanted to measure was not so much direct reports, was that managers, project people are working together better in projects. So project staff are connecting better with their managers. So we started to change that from being like, these are my direct reports, to being, how can we measure that managers are dealing with their project teams effectively? And so that changed things as well, because project teams are fluid. And we started to come up with metrics like, the number and frequency of conversations that occur within a project, and how we're going to go and track and measure that. So when you go through the measurement mapping process, it's a really powerful tool in making sure you got the right content. Now, the other side of the equation that we'd mentioned is modality choices and learner behavior. I think we would all agree here that the world's changing pretty quickly. We're finding that many businesses are under a lot of pressure from automation, from digital disruption. There's a huge push in many industries to reskill their workforce. And the old modalities of training, where I basically only have budget to train my hypos and my top leaders, isn't going to cut it, right? I need to develop new mindsets and new behaviors across my organization, including the entire individual contributor population, including the entire manager population. And so increasingly we're having to measure not just the ROI from the learning outcomes, we're also having to measure learner behavior, because having a learning culture where learners are waiting to be told what to learn and when to learn is not going to instill the agility and the adaptability that organizations need to thrive in a world where I need people to upskill and reskill on the fly. I need people to be constantly adapting to change. And so we're now designing experiences where part of our measurement map is, okay, well, what technology should we use? And so, and then once we use that technology, how will we know that those behaviors are in there? So I want you to imagine you're with that car dealership team, but now on top of the skills and performance-based measurement map, there's a second layer to this measurement map, which is the strategic goals the organization has in terms of its learning culture. So the strategic goal is that the organization, this car dealership, wants to have an adaptive, self-directed, agile learning culture, right? Because cars are constantly getting updated. There's new products being launched all the time. You've got electric vehicles coming in. There's continuous changes. There's a lot of churn in a dealership environment. So I really can't be flying people around or flying trainers in constantly to get my people upskilled. So I need an adaptive, self-directed, agile learning culture. In this car dealership, they've decided it's critical that they have communities of practice. So the best salespeople sharing their learning with others, right? The best after sales people sharing their learning with others. And also we want to have our strategic goals that we've got learning that adapts to employee needs, where it's very personalized, where I am in my career, where I am in the business. So let's say these are my strategic goals. what do you think would be some leading indicators? Remember, this is a tricky one. It has to be measurable, right? What could be some leading indicators that the experience I have designed, what are some behaviors I would be looking for that would indicate that I'm moving towards social learning, that I'm moving towards something that's self-directed, that that there's communities of practice perhaps? What are some things you might look for to measure? Go ahead. It is a tricky one because obviously your learning platform that you're using will dictate what tools you have available. But imagine you could pick any learning platform of your dreams. Put it in the chat and tell me. Okay, completion of the modules, right? So the completion rate. Now, I would suggest that a lot of LMSs track that right now, right? The completion rate, but yes, that's one thing. Yeah, the amount of time spent. It's interesting, increase in training requests. So I wonder if that could also be a decrease in training requests because now people are being more adaptive. Yeah, number of items shared. Yeah, number of times feedback has been received. Number of conversations when they do share learning. Number of returning users. You guys are totally on top of this. I totally agree. Yep, posting comments, liking videos, sharing information, asking boss to take more training. Sam, you got an extra 10 points there. Good job. Yeah, you guys have got it right. So I've just kind of summarized this, right, into a very simple version. We don't want to be an employer of choice. So some business results might be, if I change my learning and make it really about my learners, maybe I might see an improvement in Glassdoor reviews. I might see an increase engagement scores. I might see a decrease in training costs because learners are driving the learning themselves, and I'm not having to build new programs. I'm seeing an increase in job confidence, a decrease in no learning related exits. What I mean by that is when I perform an exit interview, that learning isn't the reason, lack of learning opportunities isn't the reason people tell me about. And then my indicators, you guys have already got a bunch of these. Number of minutes spent in self-directed learning, number of social posts, number of user videos. So how many times are users uploading videos of themselves doing things? Number of peer-to-peer FAQ replies. If there's an FAQ, I've kind of hypothesized some of this, right? Percentage of completion of optional activities. So I might design it to have optional and mandatory activities as a mechanism to measure what are people doing. Are they only doing the mandatory stuff? Does putting the word mandatory in there drive a certain behavior? So you've got all these different things that you can do, and I think I've duplicated one, sorry about that. Points, if you have gamification, number of times accessed a day. So if I know I want a social community, I know I want user-generated sharing, I know I want competition, then I'm going to go back and I'm going to make sure I've selected a technology that can give me some of that stuff. And on top of that, I'm going to design my experience to make that happen. I'm going to make sure I've designed in discussions. I'm going to design in things that will make people reply and respond because that's the culture I want to create. You can't teach people to be agile learners. All you can do is give them learning experiences that change their habits, that are more closely aligned to the way they learn at work. So look, I'm almost done here, guys. And I just hope that you understand a little bit around what a measurement map is, but especially the impact of a measurement map. A measurement map isn't just about measuring the outcome of learning. That is a huge benefit. But doing a measurement map at the design phase, like we mentioned earlier, right at the beginning here in this gray box on the left, what it will do is it'll help us marshal our investments around content and marshal our investments around design and technology more effectively. So doing it up front is hugely beneficial. The last thing I'm going to finish on to give us 15 minutes for questions is just quickly share with you an example of this in action. So this is a real program. And so we were developing a mentoring program for a client in the Americas. And so the objectives were we wanted to use a mentoring program with the goals of developing and retaining employees, improving individual performance, and improving company financial performance. Let me ask you in the chat, coming back to those leading indicators, how would this organization know? What are some things, if you were giving them advice, they would know if this mentoring program was working? I think, oh no, that was from the previous one, but Jocelyn's example is still relevant here. Yeah, decrease in attrition rate. Good, both of you guys are on the right track. What else would you see? There might be some business results. Okay, yep, some reviews, higher employee engagement, 360-degree feedback, increase in IJP applications. Is that internal job? I think that's internal job applications. yeah, some movement on performance grades. Thank you, Sonia. I've learned that one now, by the way, IJP. Lower staff turnover. Yeah, you guys have got the right idea. So we went through a similar process. Yeah, KPIs 360 review. You've got it. And let's see what we actually came up with this customer. This is a bit of a simplified version. But let's start from the right. Remember, we want to start with the end in mind, right? We want to increase profitability. Okay, well, to do that, we've got to reduce recruiting costs. That's how it affects profitability. Increase retention, rates of both mentors and mentees, right? That can help us increase our profitability by retaining our staff and investing in what we've got. We know that some of the other business results we can see is that we've seen an increase in promotion rate. So ding, ding, for those of you who said that, and engagement score. And then indicators, performance ratings, improved performance, increase in base pay. This was the first layer. I'm going to show you how it evolved because it actually did change. Mentee satisfaction rate with mentor, percentage of teams having meetings, percentage of mentors re-engaging, percentage of mentees who became mentors, number of mentees, number of mentors. It was actually a lot more than that, but I've really simplified it. What was really interesting about this process is as we were going through the design phase, we kind of had an honesty check, you could call it, where we went in and we said, well, how easy is it really to measure this stuff, and how reliable are these? And these lighter blue ones here, performance ratings, engagement score, we decided to drop those off for a range of reasons. Number one, performance rating. Can anyone tell me why that might not be the most reliable tool? It might be an indicator, but it's maybe not super reliable. What sometimes the performance ratings suffer from in business? Anyone want to have a go at that?
Drop that in the chat.
Yeah, bias. Yeah, you've got it right. They're very subjective. And you're right. I'm forced. I have to put one of these ratings in, right? Thank you. You guys know it better than I do. So we decided to drop that off. Base pay, also very subjective. It is meant to be pay for performance, but in reality, the level of skill that people have in managing that varies greatly across this business and every business, to be frank. Engagement score, again, hard to draw a straight line between some of those things. And also their current engagement survey they weren't interested in modifying. We had suggested to modify the engagement survey to ask some of these questions, change your engagement survey, right? But they weren't willing to do that, so we dropped that off.
And also didn't have the ability to get down to the individual, right, for anonymity's sake, so you couldn't quite track it.
Right, yeah, exactly. And engagement scores are meant to be somewhat anonymous, so only meant to get down to groups of 6 or 8. At least that's our engagement diagnostic tool. So we dropped some of these off, and still we were left with a good range of measurements. And so what was the result of that? Well, let's have a look at some of the results of this program. We rolled it out. We were able to straight away start to see, was there an increase in the number of mentees and mentors, right? Straight away, we were able to see that. And did we start to see with those who were mentoring, in those mentoring relationships, did we see some satisfaction increases? Did we see some of that going in? And we didn't see this. We saw it being successful straight away. But if we saw that it wasn't being successful, right away, we were able to be agile and responsive to that data and go back and modify the program, modify the experience, send out addended experience, add in an extra virtual session, whatever we needed to do to modify that training on the fly, rather than just leaving it sit for 2 years with a program you're not entirely happy with. So it rolled out. Here were some of the results. Program participants earned more promotions, right? You've got the control group, which was those who didn't attend the training and receive that and those who did. So 17% of mentees earned promotion, 3% control. 19% of mentors earned promotion, 4% of control. Impact on turnover. 13% was year ones. That was before we deployed the program, and 9%. Now, the question is, can mentoring take the credit for that? Because it could be a whole bunch of factors, right, that decrease turnover. Well, the great thing about measurement mapping is we've broken it down into pieces. We know what our kilogram is. We know a kilogram is made out of 1,000 grams, and so on. So what we were able to do is break that down, and we had a baseline, and we were able to check that against our control group and against our mentees and mentors who were trained, and lo and behold, the numbers were significantly lower than the control. So it did have an impact on the results. And finally, the impact on turnover was actually greater among new mentees, 14% lower than new hires who did not participate. So new hires really had a strong impact, because we all know that people are most likely to leave in the first part of their career with a company. Okay, so we got 15 minutes left for questions. what I hope you guys understand is that the measurement map provides a process for getting aligned with the business. The map identifies the data that we need in order to measure impact. A map is right if it's logical, if it's measurable, and if all parties believe it, right? So you saw in that mentoring example, we were able to say, hey, you know what? We didn't believe that some of this was going to work. Let's modify it. You don't have to measure everything. Start with whatever data you can get. And I would add something to that. Be bold and try to create data, right? Add in a survey, add in a question to your engagement survey. Do the work to make something measurable if you don't have it there in front of you. And measurement mapping is an art and a science, so just get started, right? You're going to have to figure some of this out. Yes, we'll be making some of the slides available. So look, guys, that's my summary here. What I hope you've walked away with, what Oliver and I hope you've walked away with, is a few more tools in your toolbox for learning design. Yes, this program was about, webinar was about measurement, but it wasn't just about measurement. It was about changing the way that you design your experiences and make sure that you're making smart decisions from the start rather than building a program and hoping that some sort of a miracle is going to occur and you're going to arrive where you need to go. So thanks very
Or
much,
desperately
guys.
looking around for data as well. That's the other one, right?
And then holding your vendor accountable, like GP Strategies, and saying, what's going on? Where's the data? I'm like, look, we want to measure. You've got to put the time in up front to make it possible.
And remember, the research showed that the biggest factors preventing measurement are those competing priorities, right? You're busy in your role, but that not knowing exactly what to measure or how to measure. And so starting with measurement in mind really helps you overcome that, which is the biggest challenge from our research for most learning professionals.
You know, I just want to share a really good example. We were working with an institution actually based in Singapore, and we still work with them. And they told us at the front, like to use an example that I've already shared with you, they told us at the front that they wanted their future was something with self-directed learning and where learners were being social, and we need that culture in order to thrive into the future. But then when we started designing the program, you know, we said, let's put a discussion question in here. And you know, this organization was like, no, that'll never work here. You know, we can't do that. We're not ready for that. And in the end, you know, they weren't quite right, and learners did jump in and participate. But what we were able to do is to push back a little bit and say, well, hold on a minute. If this is your strategic goal, let's build in some measurements of that to show us that it's working. And then that helped put both us as an experienced designer and them as an experienced owner on the same keel around what should be in this program and what shouldn't. It wasn't somebody's opinion, it was hard data. So that's really cool. I think there's some questions coming in the Q&A. So drop your questions into the chat.
Yeah, into the chat, and we'll see there.
Nicole's
I'm
got a
keeping an eye
question.
on the Q&A, Ben, so I think we're mostly up to date with those.
Nicole's got one saying, how do we measure ROI of soft skills training? So Nicole, it's a really good question. A lot of what we were talking about in this session was soft skills training, but you know, like I said, I operate in the field of leadership development. And so sometimes for leadership, you've got to, you going through the measurement map and picking the things that you might want to see. And a lot of it is number and frequency of certain types of interactions. So I want to see an increase in the number of coaching conversations that are occurring, right? But then I've got to back myself to try to measure that. So I might actually create a pulse, a cheap, free or whatever pulse in SurveyMonkey or whatever it may be, and I'll pulse that out to individual contributors across the population, like who report to these managers who should be doing more coaching or delegation. And I might pulse out a quick check, and then I might pulse it out again later. So I'm not hearing it from the individuals. From the managers. I'm hearing it from the individuals. Have they seen an increase in that? And that's going to help me check, has this training been successful, even though it's a soft skill? So we look a lot for frequency of things. We also do a lot of confidence surveys, pre-confidence, post-confidence, and then confidence 3 to 6 months later. So, you know, there's a lot of ways to measure it, but I will say there's a point at which you must connect with the business. So I want to start looking at those engagement surveys. I want to start looking at the attrition rates and exit interview data. And the reality is, you need to give access to your partners and to the learning team to make that happen. So there's a lot of different ways you can go about it.
We've had a couple of interesting questions, Ben, and perhaps we start with defining the difference, just reaffirming the difference between a strategic goal and business results. So we had a
Sure.
question in the chat there.
So a business result is, if you will, the last point of measurement, right? The end result is we want more profit. It's generally, a very big picture thing, profitability.
Strategic goal then, right?
It's
Not business result.
Sorry, strategic goal. Yeah, my apologies. Yeah. So it's typically something right at the end of the measurement chain, and usually for a business, the results for a business are the strategic goals for business are cultural, they're values oriented, and they're shareholder oriented. And then behind that, everything else builds up to it. So business, so it's I want to be profitable and I'm a tech company, right? My business result, maybe I want to increase my market share and profitable, but my business result might be more products to come to market, And so it's really looking at that last line in the measurement of what the business measures as success. And so in this example, number of positive Glassdoor reviews is not really the way that the business defines its success. The way the business defines its success is through maybe being rated as profitability. um, it could be rated as a great place to work, I suppose, could fall into there. There might be a little gray area that goes between, but the way to measure it is this the last thing I'm going to measure? That's our typical rule of thumb. Is it going to go any further than this?
And some of these strategic goals may be more aspirational as being an employer of choice, and there might not be a clear metric of we are the
How to
employer
measure
of
that?
choice in
Yeah.
our industry. And really looking at the business results are going down a level of granularity to be able to look at how do we define that strategic goal? What are the indicators that we can find there?
So someone else has asked, Brian's asked about how do we measure level 4, and I'm getting to Sonia's question in a moment. Well, this whole process was around defining level 4. So level 4 is business result, level 5 is ROI, and people debate whether or not they're one and the same. And the goal is to create that causal chain, right? So if I come back to this example here, that if strategic goals and business results kind of start to move to that level 4, level 5 level, then I want to work backwards from there. So the art of measuring level 4 is that I've worked backwards in steps to get to what level 4 is. If I just imagine, just saying I want to measure level 4 is operating in this realm, right? I've got my training and I want an impact on my level 4, like my business outcomes. And in the middle, does a miracle occur? The process that we're advocating for is that you map out from back to front, starting with strategic goals, the steps that demystify that process. So there's no one way to measure level 4, but the simple answer is you measure your first leading indicators, and those leading indicators should connect to business results, and those business results should tie to your strategic goals. That is how you get to level 4. Having access to that data is a whole nother question, right? As a vendor, we don't always get access to level 4 data, but yet are held accountable to try to change the results on it. So it's a tricky place to be from our perspective. Sonia said, I promised I'd get to Sonia's. We have a very small training team. While we have tried applying Kirkpatrick to check if there have been any behavioral changes, we haven't been successful due to bandwidth. Yeah. Look, there is a time dimension to this, Sonia. There's no doubt about it. One suggestion, and I'm not trying to sell ourselves here, is to partner and put some of the responsibility onto your training partner if you are using one. But if you're doing all of your training in-house, maybe create additional pulses that give you some of that, right? So you can create little surveys if you've designed it in advance, because to measure something, you need some sort of an A/B test. You need a comparative point, right? So if you aren't measuring it now, it's going to be very hard for you to measure it later. So what I would recommend, Sonia, is when you're designing a learning, you want to do something, think first about measurement, and maybe there's a quick, cheap, and simple pulse survey you can send out, or something you can do to get some data on the behaviors or the skills or whatever it is you're trying to teach. Then when you roll out your program, you can pulse it again. But if you haven't done that first pulse, it puts you really behind the 8 ball in trying to do those measurements later. So I'd recommend a pinch of prevention is worth a pound of cure in this regard.
I would agree with
Yeah.
that, Ben. And the other
Yeah.
thing that I would say is, we know that it's the biggest barrier, right? Conflicting priorities. And I think one of the key things also is to look at what you are already measuring, right? Look for that low-hanging fruit. There are many metrics within the organization, hopefully, that you can look at and see, are these business results or are these leading indicators that we can leverage when we're looking at this? And really, the purpose of the measurement map and putting measurement first from a design standpoint is we often look for what is already being measured, so that we can have the before and after without trying to create new ways of measuring and burning a lot of time trying to do that. So definitely, if you take this approach and you zoom out and you can ask those questions when you're feeling like you're being a pharmacist and the business is coming to you saying, I want such and such a program. If you can get ahead of that curve and you can start really partnering with the business to understand, what is the strategic goal? What are the business indicators we want to move? Then it's actually going to impact what you're designing in the first place. So I would just add that to Ben's comment.
There's some more chats coming through. I can see we've got some from Colin. I'm going to try to get through. There's one that jumps out at me here from Janice. Survey rating is rather subjective. Are there any methods of measuring an intangible indicator? Well, I want to stress here that the whole goal of measurement mapping is that you should not be putting things on here that are intangible, right? That is the art of it. So spending time now to try to make it tangible, to try to make it something you can measure, and then deciding if a survey is the right way to do it. Is it anecdotal? Is it going to be interviews? Is there some other system or platform or something we can use to measure that? So as long as you have the word intangible in the conversation, then that means that step at the front to really turn those intangibles into tangibles hasn't yet been done. And look, it is an art and a science. Like I said, it takes time to sit in a room and figure out, we want to train this somewhat intangible mindset shift or behavior shift. What are the things that we're going to measure to make that happen? That is the conversation. So I don't know if I have so you can't say a survey is rather subjective. What's written in the survey can be subjective. The quality of the question itself can be subjective, but I couldn't say that a survey alone is subjective. So if you've made the intangible tangible, and then you've aligned your survey or whatever it is to capture that data, then it becomes quite tangible, quite quantitative. So there's another question here that's come in from Colin. Can you quantify ROI in dollars for the board? Colin, mate, I'm going to need a little bit more clarity. Oliver, do you get that question with the dollars for the board? Can you quantify ROI in dollars for the board?
I don't have any further. So if Colin, if you're in the chat, please do select send to all attendees and just do fill us in on a little bit more. But is this a question that you're getting that hey, I want to know the ROI in dollars for this program when you're running a program? Is that the question that you're given? I want to invest in a coaching program for these people because of these reasons. And the question that the board's giving you is, tell me how many dollars this program is going to directly create. Is that the question? Or perhaps I'm getting the wrong end of the stick. So Colin, if you can, just in the chat, please do select all attendees and drop in and maybe a little bit of clarification for us there. Ultimately,
I will say that
happy to have a conversation offline as well, so we can go some backwards.
I will say there is a reason why, like even for the mentoring example that we mentioned towards the end, that we do arrive at dollars, because I think if that's the point you're getting at, that ultimately people want to see if I'm spending $500,000 on this global training program, they want to see actual dollars. Let me just have a look here. What I mean is, if we're approaching a measurement project, it'd be good to have advice to advise ROI, and it should exceed cost of measurement. Oh, so you're giving some guidance. Yeah, I totally agree. So is the cost of actually going through this measurement mapping process and actually going and doing this investment, is it actually detracting from the value that it's receiving? Is that what I'm understanding, Colin? Just wait for Colin to come back. And while we're doing that, we've got another question from Kieran. Do you recommend isolating factors at any stage? Is that something that can be done? So Kieran, do you mean like just zeroing in on one or two dimensions rather than trying to expand out? Is that what you're referring to? just put us in the chat there. So Colin's come back and said, yep. Yeah, look, a lot of the experiences we work in, okay, I can see Kieran. So Colin, a lot of the experiences that we develop, we try to make scalable solutions. So we're reaching large populations. There are some learnings that are maybe too small to have that impact. So maybe you wouldn't do your measurement mapping. But even if you're doing measurement mapping just for the point of validating that this is the right program, can be valuable by itself, even if you have no intention of actually doing the measurement later, but you just want to try to figure out, well, hang on a minute, I want to train these salespeople. What do they really need? What does performance improvement look like in specific terms? I've done it just for that, knowing full well that the client had no intention to actually go and measure these things or to provide us with that data, but it became a very powerful tool to validate the alignment of a learning initiative, and if it was actually going to hit them in the behaviors that they needed to be hit. And so back to Kieran, let's see.
Isolating factors almost like a scientist, right?
So,
Trying to isolate the variables. You can do it with control groups to a certain degree, but remember, science in a laboratory is brilliant. This is definitely a mix between an art and a science, and truly isolating variables across multiple different control groups is going to be limited in the eminently human domain that we work in. But
one can still choose what they want to focus on. In the case of the mentoring part, isolating the parts they felt were most relevant and discounting the parts they felt would be unreliable. But you could also isolate in another way by choosing exactly one area of focus and ignore the rest. Sure. For me, as a learning designer, right, and I lead a team of experienced designers across the region, for me as a designer, the most value is in the design phase, in feeling confident that we're actually building an experience that's going to have an impact. And then secondarily, as long as the client is invested in it, being able to then measure immediately are those, because the leading indicator should be the very first signs that things are changing. The amount of times in the last couple of years that I've been able to look at some things that weren't happening and go and pivot and change for future programs or future cohorts and see that actually that change did have the impact. It's huge for a designer, and it's huge for a company to know that they're not just stuck with something that's static and not going to change. So guys, look, we're 5 minutes over. I apologize if we haven't got through everyone's questions. I want to respect everyone's time and say thank you so much for everyone attending. Oliver, why don't you wrap up, mate?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is, we're continually doing webinars on key topics, and we do encourage a two-way conversation on these. We're not just sending these out because we're guessing at what you guys would want to see. We're also listening to the feedback that we get from each of these sessions and the sorts of things that are important to you as well. So one of the things that will be coming up in the next I think in the next 2 months, although the date's not set, but we will make sure you all get an invite, is we will be having one of our colleagues from our leadership team in the US join us, and we'll be having a dialogue about digital self-led learning journeys, and specifically about whether or not they're right for organizations in Asia. And that's one that I'm really looking forward to.
And in the field of leadership specifically, right? So leadership development, traditionally the domain of classroom. How can you do that in a self-led experience, and is it the right fit? Because the Holy Grail would be able to reach all our leaders, right, rather than just the top 10%. So yeah.
Well, and the great thing is this is us now looking at a slightly more senior level of leader. So not those frontline leadership skills of the basics around delegation and stuff like that, but really taking it up to that more strategic level, which I think is where a lot of organizations are reticent to look at things like digital self-led and the
like authenticity or strategic planning and some of those more mindset related things. Yeah.
Absolutely. And really what we'll be looking at is what do we mean by a digital self-led journey? And it is not sit and click e-learning at all. We're talking about application on the job, support from coaches and experts, and really diving into the options that are out there to kind of build these kind of things for your organization. So especially if you're in a large organization.
This, right, Oliver?
Effectively, it's us doing this and kind of talking about this live, and it's going to be a dialogue between myself and my colleague Leah Clark. So thank you all for staying on for these extra 7 minutes, and we really look forward to see you in the future. In the meantime, if you do want to get in touch, you do want to have a conversation about this or other learning topics that are of interest to you, please do reach out, and I'll drop my email into the chat right now so that you can reach us.
Thanks, guys. A pleasure. Appreciate your time and have a great week ahead.
Thanks, everybody. Feel free to get in touch and have a great end to your week. So, Zach and Mavis, if you want to shut down the session, and wishing everybody a great end to their week and weekend ahead.
I want to have webinar closing music next time, Oliver, like a news
Opening
press.
music, closing
yeah, where you know how
music.
the news readers, they start talking to each other on mute afterwards, and the music
Hang
starts
on,
playing.
let me get a stack of paper. Oh, my video's not on.
Right.
you gotta have the stack of paper in front of you, and that's the news.
Yes. Thanks, guys. See you later.
This webinar is brought to you by GP Strategies. Together we can create a world where business excellence makes possibilities achievable. You can access more webinars or download additional resources at gpstrategies.com/resource-library.